Hello guys, this is Abdurrahman Gilal, and today I'm going to explain you something about exception handling. But before I go and explain about exception handling, I would like to just summarize you the program that I have written. Basically, I have written a simple, program that will help me to take two numbers from user, and it will show me the division of those two numbers. So I have dividend and divisor. So here I have a message to get the input from user, and then there is another input from user, give me dividend and enter me the divisor. And then I have made a method called divide. So that method is static, which means I do not have to create any object to call it. So I have called divide method, receive two dividend and divisor both parameters, and then return me the division. So let's run it and see like how it works. So let me say 3 and I say 2, so it returns me 1, so it's the right output because I'm expecting that integer will always return me the integer. So let me run it again and try to see how it's gonna happen. If I say 10 divided by 2, so it's 5, perfectly fine. So it is fine when I am asking a user to answer me the number and user answers me the number clearly. But how about like if I ask, give me into the dividend, so I said 3 and boom, I got an error. So what kind of error is it? So compiler is telling me that exception in thread called and main, and then the exception type in input mismatch exception. So this is going to tell you that something is happening which is unexpected, output of the program. So in this type of situation, when we have written a code as a programmer and user is trying to input something unexpectedly weird, which is going to cause a problem. So how to do that, how to make sure that this type of situation does not cause the overall program to be abandoned. So in this situation, the programming languages such as Java gives us a possibility to handle those type of exceptions. So there are two different terms that are being used always in programming languages. One is called error, another one is called, exception. So when I say error, which means I am trying to say it's a condition, such as in, Java virtual machine running out of memory. So this type of error is going to cause us, a big damage. And then there's a stack overflow error. So there could be several errors which we may encounter. But that error is basically, logical error as well. So in this type of situation, when we are running the program and the program is executing in the situation that we just observed, that we could not understand the behavior of user very well. So user input 3 in a string, and then all of a sudden our program has got, an error that is basically not called an error, but that was an exception. So how this type of situation is known as exception, that indicates a condition that a reasonable application might try to catch. So which means that you would be prepared as a programmer to receive, this type of situation. So how do we handle that? We have certain things provided by the Java, developers or programming developers. They have already given us certain classes which are there to, catch the errors. And there are certain situations where you do not exactly know, what can happen. And then in this type of situation, you may define your own exceptions. So basically, in how to say in Java or in any programming languages, we can face different type of exceptions, such as invalid user input, and then we can also have a problem that if our program is connected with the other devices and the devices are passing us some input or some output, so maybe the devices are failed, or maybe we may lose a connection of network if we are working on a network-based application, or sometimes it's possible that out of disk memory space, so it's possible that we are out of space. And also like we may have like a file like we are trying to opening, so it's unavailable. So in this type of all situation, there may be even vulnerable situation which we do not exactly know. So what type of situation can come? So we do not exactly know. So these are certain exception occurs, possibilities of occurring. So now let's just talk about this type of error because, sorry, exception, which we have already faced here. So how to handle that? As I just told you that we have a library available which we can directly work on. So let me just quickly, explain you within the same develop program. So let's run it. So first of all, we have to write a keyword called try, and then we have to call keyword called catch, and then we have to write exception. And this exception is a class that is developed class, you're gonna see. So it's a public class, which basically, it's suitable subclass is a form throwable that indicates condition that reasonable applicant might want to catch. So here we do not specify which specific exception we are looking for. It's just gonna say like all type of, or we can make this input mismatch exception here as well. So let me run this first and I'm going to explain you later. So if this happens, what should I do? I should basically print a message for a developer to know that what type of situation are you going to face now. You are having an exception. So now, which type of exception are you facing? It's a good thing is that if we can show the message. So there are some, because this is a class, so this E is a method, sorry, object. The exception is a class, so E is object. So object will show us that what other things are available here. So many things are available. So let's just take a get message. It's possible that we are receiving some message. Or before I go for the get message, better I call the toString method here so that we can see like if there is some predefined string available for us to be, viewing. So now let's run it. Okay, go ahead. So we saw that when we tried to write 3, so we found an error. So now we are having exception, that you are having an exception, Java, utility input mismatch exception. This is what I was about to say. I just said that in this type of situation, you have to be, ready. So now it's also showing me there is an error called division by zero. So will discuss this a bit later. So I must, repeat it again that this try will run the body. If there is no errors, that's perfectly fine. And this cage will find if there is an exception in the try body. If there is no exception, that's perfectly fine. That's right. Let's say 2 divided by 2. So no error at all, no exception at all. So I'm sorry when I'm saying error, I'm referring to words, a logical error. So now run it again, and I'm gonna say now 3. So run this, and then we're gonna find an error, sorry, exception. Let's just call it the mismatch exception. Now let me let me try to handle this type of situation as well. But the better I create my own class, which will help me to, make you understand better that if you have a situation where you do not have you do not have any predefined exception handling available, then how you gonna do that? So let me make a class. So when you make a class, you should remember that this class is going to be, how to say, okay, so first, this is very important. I forgot to tell you that in order to write exception here, you can write here like input, this exactly, sorry, input mismatch exception. So it's going to be the same if you run that. So you're not going to face any problem here. If I say 3 and I hit enter, so you're going to see the same error here. So are we going to say like to get message and then run this? Well, let's see what happens here. So this is showing me null because we did not pass any value to it yet. So no error is basically no detail of the exception is being printed because we did not pass any message yet. So just keep it, as simple as it is here. I will explain you when I pass some throw, situation. So, okay, this is done. So we have a situation where we have exception, input mismatch exception, or we can directly write exception, anything that you prefer to keep. If you are very much certain that the input problem is happening, then you can write this. But how about if the problem is this one, as you just saw it here, that divided by zero. So arithmetic exception divided by zero. So let's run it. So first of all, we have to do one thing. Okay, so when you write in IntelliJ or any other compiler, the input mismatch exception will basically be imported. So now I'm going to make a class. So I'm going to make a class, my own class that basically going to help me to, you know, help me to receive my own exceptions. So I'm going to say division by zero exception. This is my class. So if I make it on my own, so I'm not sure, like there are so many other type of exceptions. So basically it's always a good practice that you extend the one that is already there. So we know that this class is available. So we just simply extend this class. So with this way, we have this class available means division by zero exception class available, as well as exception class properties are included in here now. So let's say, you know, so make the constructor of this, and then you, as I told you, we receive null here. So what type of error are we going to pass now? Sorry, what kind of message we're going to pass now? So here we say like message, and then we say super, because we know that this exception class will have its own constructor. So this will help us to print this message instead of making our own message. So better we create this class and then we pass it to. So now I know that, okay, so this is my class now. Instead of calling exception, I'm going to call my own class. This is right here. Okay, so I'm going to do here. So give me a second. So I'm going to do the same thing, try, and I'm going to, you know, here, I'm gonna say like if this works fine, this is okay. Otherwise, catch what to catch. Here I put exception divided by zero and I put E as my object name. And here I'm gonna say, okay, we're gonna see what's this error. Give me a second. Okay, so I'm gonna say system.out, sorry, system.out.println. And here I'm gonna say message. And exception occurred. And then here I'm gonna say a message basically. So as I told you here, so what kind of error is happening here that this one does not return me anything yet here, because if I try it here, that's gonna be perfectly fine. But the division happens here. So let's say if there we're gonna encounter the same error even if we run this. So okay, give me a second. So we have to put, okay, that's perfectly fine. So now I'm gonna say like, okay, give me a second. Okay, so we are facing this division by error. We're gonna see the exception division by is never thrown. So we have not basically thrown anything to this class. So how do we do that? It's simple is that anywhere it is happening to be the, the division is happening. So what we have to do is to make sure that divisor, if that is zero, which means this shouldn't be done. So what we have to do is to now throw an object of what? Object of division by zero exception constructor, which means to this class. And then what we're gonna say that we're gonna say division by zero is not allowed, let's say. So now this is going to create a clear-cut message that we cannot, you know, okay, let's run it first. Okay, what type of error it is? Some signatures method. Okay, I understand. Give me a second. Okay, so this one is saying that if we have made this method, then it means this method needs to throw an exception to which class. So this is our class there where it will be throwing the exception. So there are a few things that we have to understand. First, we have to throw an exception to the class that we are actually trying to pass the message. And then by this way, this is calling the constructor of the same class and then passing a message. And this message will be directed towards here, right here. And then this message will be passed to the exception that extends. So let's run it. So now we know that, number one, this try block will basically try to just verify if the input is matched. If not, then we will have an error called get message this one, which basically is coming from this, class called exception. And then we have another block of code, which we try to say like if we are dividing two numbers using a divide method, so it should be not divided by zero. So divisor should not be zero in any case. So we are trying to catch the error if that's not the case, and we assume that we do not have this is by default. So we have created a class called division by zero exception, extended exception class, and then we are throwing the error to this class by this message, and then if not, then this will be perfectly fine. So let's run it. So here, let's say I said 4 divided by 2, it's all right. And now I'm going to say 4 divided by 2. So you're going to say you're having an error except you're having an exception that is null. Why it's null? Because we are printing a message here, so which we did not pass any message yet. So better to say to a string. Now we run it again. And then I'm going to say 4 and then 2. So you're gonna see that program is absolutely stop fine, and the other line of code has happened perfectly fine. Only a thing that we're gonna see that okay, so we have called you are having an error, so you have an exception, and that is called null. I expected it's gonna be happen here, but okay. So this is my to a string should be here. Okay, so let's run it. Okay, now I'm gonna say two. So basically Java utility input mismatch and exception occurred divided by zero, and then we have said division by zero is not allowed. That is our, this is the message coming from exception class, and this is the message that we just passed. So and then there is another uh, you know another situation where you have a code that you anyhow want to be executed, that is called finally block. So give me a second, I type it for you. Okay, so in order to just explain you, there is another block that is not try and catch. The try block does, execution first time, and then catch block is trying to catch the errors. But there are most of the situation when we have a finally block, which means that anyhow this has to happen. So this has to happen means that, for instance, that we are receiving this input. Once the input is done, then we are expecting that the input file has to be closed. So we do not have to keep the input closing here. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna make it close here. Try, and then we have catch, and sorry, yeah. So the try and catch, and then we're gonna make it close here. So what we're gonna do is that simply we write finally, and then we put it here. So let's say in the situation that if this was successful, so this will not happen, but finally will also happen. And there's a scenario, then this does not happen, which means try block didn't work, catch block happened, but catch will still close the file. So there are most of the situation when we are working with the databases, or we are working with filings. So in an error situation, in order to prevent our data to be leaked, or in order to make a security of the data or privacy of the data, it is always necessary to close the connection. So that's where we use the finally block. The finally block is something that is part of exception handling, and that's very easy. That we have to keep it after the after the cage block. I hope it makes sense. If you have any error, sorry, if you have any issue to be discussing with me, please do not hesitate to drop me in the comment. Thanks a lot.